Good evening, students. Welcome back to the session on audit. So today we plan to start with a new topic, a very interesting topic, I would say, and very practical topic in terms of the understanding that we are going to gain out of it. This is about peer review and quality review. I'm saying this to be very practical because this is something which we need to understand in terms of how the process will really move in respect of this topic. And I would really say that we should try to create a sort of situation or understand this topic by creating a situation every time we discuss any of the subtopics in this topic, because that will be the best way to understand this. And the moment you will have this complete process in your mind, this topic you will consider to be very easy and very interesting also. So let us first of all understand about the meaning of peer review. As the terminology only suggests, what do we mean by peer or the peer group? Peer group means a person of similar standing. Generally, let's suppose if we talk about our friends, they are our peers. Generally, see, all of you are currently preparing for CA final examinations. So all of you can be considered to be peer group. Yeah. So this is about the meaning of the peers. Let us now try to understand the meaning of review. This is something which will be very clear to you already, but this is not in the context of audit, or this is not in the context of limited review, wherein we discussed that it's a diluted form of audit. No. So we are just talking about review in a very simple manner, in terms of understanding of the layman. So what would review really mean? Review would mean conduct of re-examination or retrospective evaluation of the subject matter. Or you can say checking of something which has already been done. And one may really think that is it not similar to an audit? Yes, this is similar to an audit, but unlike in case of an audit, we don't give any opinion over here. Neither opinion which will lead to or which will require some sort of reasonable assurance, or neither any type of conclusion which will require any type of limited assurance. So both the things are not required. We just need to understand everything, and we need to examine everything, whether that has been done as it was required or not. Okay, yeah. Now, in the context of peer review or something that we need to discuss, now what would peer review mean? Peer review would mean review by the peer and review of the peer. Okay. It would mean review by the peer and review of the peer. Now, for understanding this, let me just try to bring in few parties, and through that we will try to understand how this peer review process will work and who is going to be the peer review, peer reviewer, and all of these parties which are going to be involved, and broadly as to how this process will really move. So we are now discussing about peer review, wherein first of all we need peers, correct? We need peers. So let's say there are two professional firms. Professional firms means CA firms which are into practice. So they may be about proprietors or they may be partnership firms. They can be either of them. So let's say there are two firms, XYZ and company. This is one firm. And then we have LMN and company. Both of them are professional firms. And both of them are therefore peers, because both of them are into practice, both of them are into practice around the professional stuff. Now, what would review mean here? Review would mean that one firm out of these two will review the work of another firm. Something like this. Say, LMN and company, let us suppose, reviews the work of XYZ and company. So what would it mean? It would mean peer review. Who is the reviewer here? LMN and company. And who is getting reviewed? XYZ and company. Okay? So we may give this term of peer reviewer to LMN and company, and the term of the firm which is getting reviewed to XYZ and company. So there's a technical term which is attached in this case with this firm, and that is called as practice unit. Now, practice unit means the firm which is into practice. This term can also be assigned to LMN and company, but in the context of peer review, it is assigned to the firm which becomes subject to review or which is getting reviewed. That will be called as a practice unit. Okay? Yeah? Clear on these two terms? Yeah? Now let's see and let's try to understand why would this review be required? Because that is another very, very important point to understand, that why would this review be required and what would this review cover? Means, what is it that LMN and company is going to cover? So is it like LMN and company will review the financial statements of this firm, which is nothing but an audit? Yeah? Or is there anything else which this firm or the peer reviewer will review? Now, for the purposes of peer review, we are not discussing about review or audit or any examination of financial statements of this firm. No. Instead, we need to check whether XYZ and company has been carrying out its professional engagements as per the requirements of professional standards or not. Simply, whether this firm has been ensuring quality in all the jobs, in all the projects which it has been executing or not. So why is this review carried out? To ensure quality. That's the objective. And we can say that's the only objective. Only objective is to ensure that the firm is maintaining quality standards. And how do we define this quality? Again, very simple. To ensure quality, this firm is only required to ensure that it has been following all the professional standards. Professional standards, I'm just using a broad term and a general term, which will include accounting standards. So it will ensure compliance with professional standards, which may include accounting standards, because that's very important for this firm to maintain quality in terms of the projects it may have, like statutory audit, auditing standards. Yeah, that's the other thing. Compliance with various laws and regulations. Fourth, compliance with the ethical requirements, because that is another very important part which is required to be followed by all the professional firms. Yeah. ethical requirements. Now, in case this firm has been doing this, means it has been maintaining quality, then whatever review this firm will conduct, it will come out to be clean. Means they will come out with a clean assessment or an assessment that the work done by this firm has been fine. In case this firm will not be maintaining the professional standards, will not be maintaining the quality in terms of their work, then what will happen? Their report will have these observations. Yeah. Now, another question which may arise is that who will direct this firm to conduct review of this firm, or why would any professional firm get its work reviewed by another firm? Means where does this mandate come from? Is it mandatory or is it optional? Or who is the governing body in this process? So that's why I will need to bring in one more party to this process, and that is called as peer review board. Peer review board. Now we'll talk about peer review board in more detail. We can just currently say that this is one of the board of the ICI. This board will require peer review of this firm to be conducted by a peer reviewer. Okay, or you can say this mandate comes from this board, and which is, as we all understand, as we all know, is mandatory. So it's not an option which the board to firm. No, it's something which is mandatory, which has to be done or which has to be conducted in respect of this firm. Okay, yeah. I think one more party which may be required to be considered over here is the party, or we can say the entity, whose work would have been reviewed by this practice unit and which is now getting reviewed by another professional firm. So that's why I can bring in another company. Let's suppose ABC Limited. ABC Limited. Let's suppose audit of financial statements of ABC Limited was conducted by XYZ and company. Means this firm performed audit of financial statements of this company. Now, this work which XYZ and company has completed, this audit which has been completed by this practice unit, now this work is becoming subject to review by LMN and company. In this case, it would not mean that peer reviewer will audit the financial statements of ABC Limited again. No. We are not getting into a situation wherein any sort of duplication will arise. No, that's not the objective. That is not required to be done, and that is not done. It's very simple. Audit of financial statements of ABC Limited is already completed. Working papers, or we can say audit documentation, audit files of XYZ and company should have been completed. They should have been ready. Now, peer reviewer will come to check those audit files, and he will not be checking financial statements. He will not be checking the work of the management. No, he will now be checking the work of the auditor. So we can also say in very, very simple terms, it's an audit of auditor. Okay, in very layman terms, you can say audit of auditor, but audit of auditor will mean that review of this auditor, and in terms of review, what is the scope? The work which the auditor has completed and not the financial statements, which we generally understand in the context of review. Okay, so now in this process, even though we will have 4 parties, but which all active parties will be involved in this process? Peer review board, practice unit, and peer reviewer. There will not be any interaction or involvement of this entity in this entire process, because work of this entity is already completed, so they are done. So our entire process will be covering only these 3. All right, yeah, all of you clear on this? Clear on the overall process of this peer review? Okay, so let's move on to the detailed requirements of peer review now. And with this understanding, I am hoping that you will be able to appreciate most of the detailed requirements. Peer review means an examination and review of the systems and procedures to determine. So basically we are saying it's an examination and review of the systems, procedures to determine whether they have been put in place by the practice unit. By the practice unit for ensuring quality of assurance services. Now this is another very important point, that when we are looking at the quality of the work of practice unit, we are currently limited to the assurance services. We are not talking about all the services which practice unit would have rendered during the year. No. Now, what are the assurance services? So this can be the next point. What are these assurance services? What do we mean by assurance services? Assurance services mean wherein any kind of attestation is required. Or we can say which is something different from consultancy services wherein attestation is not required. For example, statutory audit, it's an assurance service. Why? It requires attestation. Tax audit is an assurance service. Why? It requires attestation. Certification is also an assurance service. Why? It requires attestation. But we will also be getting into detail of these assurance services as to what all assurance services are covered in this process of peer review. Okay. And then it says that for ensuring the quality of assurance services as envisaged and implied or mandated by the technical standards, ethical standards, professional standards, and whether these were effective or not during the period under review. Effective in the context of practice unit. Now we are not checking the effectiveness of process or effectiveness of any system for the management of the company. No, we are all checking this for the practice unit. Okay. Examination and review of a practice unit would be carried out by a reviewer, that is a member selected from a panel of reviewers maintained by the board. So the board, which board is this? We are talking about peer review board. So peer review board generally would create a panel of various reviewers, because they will not reach out to any CA firm or any professional firm for doing this review. No, they will have to create a separate panel. Panel means a team of various firms or team of various chartered accountants who would be eligible for doing this peer review. Only the firm out of those panelists can do the peer review. Okay. Now in terms of the practice unit, it means member in practice, whether practicing individually or as a firm. Yeah. And what are the objectives? As we have discussed, comply with technical, professional, ethical standards as applicable, including other regulatory requirements, and have in place proper systems, including documentation, to demonstrate the quality of the assurance services. Thus, what's the primary objective? Primary objective of peer review is not to find out deficiencies, no, but to improve the quality of services rendered by the members of the profession. And how can this quality be improved? See, when the process of review will be completed, peer reviewer will come out with some observations. Now, those observations could cover some of the deficiencies in the audit. Let's say, for example, which practice unit might have missed. Maybe they may be talking about certain accounting standards which have not been applied properly. Maybe some of the ethical requirements which were not considered properly by the practice unit. Now, these observations will not be coming from only one review. There will be multiples of reviews which will be going on. All of these observations are then compiled, assessed by the board, that what are those general known compliances, what are those general deficiencies, which are then communicated to the practicing professionals so that they can then going forward improve this. So that's the intent, so that improvement can be brought in the work of the practicing professionals. Okay. This part we have discussed, so I'll just move forward. Now, what does the scope covers? Scope of review to be conducted lays down as under. This shall apply to all the assurance services provided by the practicing unit. First of all, a practice unit will be selected for review. Then its assurance engagement records shall be subject to review. So first of all, a firm will be selected, means this one, and then after selecting this firm, its engagement will have to be selected, which will become subject to review. The review shall cover all of these things to ensure quality. So all of these things are required to be reviewed by the peer reviewer. Compliance with technical, professional, ethical standards. Quality of reporting. Reporting is what? Reporting is all about audit report or assurance report, which would have been issued by the practice unit. Systems and procedures which the practice unit will have. See, every practice unit will also have their in-house processes. They will have their systems which they use, which they would have been using for the purposes of carrying out assurance services. Now, those systems, those procedures of the practice unit are required to be reviewed by the peer reviewer. Okay. Training programs for the staff, including articled clerks or the articled assistants and the audit assistants concerned with assurance functions, including availability of appropriate infrastructure. Now, this is considered to be a very important aspect in relation to maintaining the quality of work. See, if we talk about any of the services rendered by a professional firm, people are involved in rendering of those services. Because it's not a product which is required to be sold. Or even if we call this to be a product, this product is nothing but a service which will be sold to the client or the customer. And all of these services, all of these products will involve people. Yeah, those people will comprise of article assistants, audit assistants, chartered accountants, and various other persons. That's why to ensure quality of work, it's very, very important that appropriate skill set, the right knowledge is provided to all of these people or all of these team members. Because if they do not know about how the work is required to be done, if they don't know as to how a process is required to be audited, let's suppose if they don't understand the accounting standards, if they don't understand the auditing standards, if they don't know anything about the regulations, will that team be able to carry out the audit efficiently and properly? The answer is no. Because for an audit, thorough knowledge of all of these things are required. Only then you can go and challenge the client. Only then you can check whether all of the things are happening in a right manner at the client place or not. Otherwise, it will become very difficult. Correct? Yeah. Now, for achieving this objective, it's very important that the staff is trained so that he will have the right skill set, right knowledge, appropriate knowledge, plus the staff is also upgraded. Because let's suppose there is a person who has some knowledge about a subject, but that knowledge will require updation because every time there are updations which are going on. So let's say, for example, if we talk about GST, every now and then there are updates in GST. If a person will say 2 years back he read GST in detail and after that he has not updated himself on anything regarding the GST, so will that knowledge be of much use? The answer may be no. Why? Because currently the way GST might be working may be significantly different from what he might have read and what he may be knowing right now. That's why another way is to upgrade the staff, and that is only possible by training of the staff, training at the right time regularly. So that's why for a professional firm, training which will include the upgradation of the staff through various training programs is considered to be very important. Otherwise, what will happen? Otherwise, all of these things may not really get into the right way, and the end objective of ensuring quality could not be achieved. Okay, yeah. Now this again is required to be reviewed by the peer reviewer. Next, compliance with the directions, guidelines issued by the Council of ICI to the members, including the fees to be charged, number of audits undertaken, register for assurance engagements conducted during the year, and such other related records. Now, compliance with various directions which the council might have been issued are again important. Why? Because they are towards ensuring quality. They are towards various procedures, various activities which need to be carried out by the members. Now again, these all, I would say, are more of related to the ethical requirements. So that's why it's very, very important that the ethical requirements have been taken care of. Compliance with directions, guidelines issued by the council in relation to article assistants, audit assistants, including their attendance register, work diaries, stipend payments, and such other related records. Now there are various regulations around the articled assistants, audit assistants, in terms of their payout, in terms of their attendance, in terms of their working hours, and who is required to take care of all of these things. Professional firm. Yeah, professional firm, or we can say the practice unit. Now any engagement which would have been carried out, so let's suppose if we talk about this engagement, this would have involved articled assistants, audit assistants. So that's why it again becomes important to understand and to check whether the compliance or whether the regulations which have been issued by the council in relation to those people which are involved in this audit or in this engagement were taken care of, were complied with by the practice unit or not. So that is again a kind of, you can say, legal requirement, regulatory requirement, which peer reviewer needs to check. Okay. Statement of peer review aims to confine the scope of review to preceding 3 years, since this would establish the consistency or deviations, if any, in respect of procedures followed by the practice unit. We can come back to this point slightly later. Let us now understand that in relation to this assurance services, what all services will not be required to be considered, or which all services will not be considered as assurance services. So these services which you can see on the screen right now will not be considered as assurance services. Management consultancy engagements, representation before various authorities like income tax, GST, sales tax, engagements to prepare tax returns, advising clients in relation to taxation matters, engagements for the compilation of financial statements, engagements solely to assist the client in preparing, compiling, collating information other than financial instruments, testifying as an expert witness, providing expert opinion on the points of principle, such as accounting opinion in relation to any accounting standard or application of an accounting standard, or the applicability of certain laws on the basis of facts provided by the client, any due diligence engagement. Okay, yeah. All of these services that we have discussed are what? These are all in the nature of consultancy services, which have nothing to do with attestation. Yeah, or you can say all of these services are similar to what a management would do, or these are mostly considered to be a management function or in the nature of management function. But assurance services are different from that. Okay, which are generally used in the context of audit services, attest services. All right, yeah. Now we need to understand as to how this peer review would become applicable and to whom it would become applicable and at what intervals. Now for the applicability of peer review, practice units can be segregated into three categories: level 1, level 2 and level 3. Level 1, level 2, level 3. So let's understand what all things are covered in level 1, level 2, level 3. A practice unit which has undertaken any of the under mentioned assurance services will be considered to be a level 1 practice unit. So let's see which all assurance services would be covered over here. First, central statutory audit of public sector banks, private sector banks, foreign banks, cooperative banks, public financial institutions. And we are talking about its central statutory audit because all of these entities will have various branches and their head office. Yeah, so central statutory audit will mean their audit which will include consolidation of all of these HO and branches, means wherein this complete entity as a whole will be covered instead of looking at only the branches of these type of organizations. Okay, next, similarly to the above one, central statutory audit of central or state public sector undertakings, central cooperative societies based on criteria such as turnover or paid up capital, as may be decided by the board. Which board will decide? Central statutory audit of insurance companies, statutory audit, now we are not talking about central, statutory audit of asset management companies or the mutual funds, because for them all of these branches etc you will not see. Generally they will have one unit which will be consolidated and not so much segregated. Then further on this list, what all audits or the engagements are covered? Statutory audit. So in level 1 you can see all the audits which are covered are statutory audit, means no other audit is covered first of all. And which all other entities may be covered over here? Statutory audit of entities whose equity or debt are listed in India or abroad, means the listed companies. Statutory audit of entities which have raised funds from public or banks or public financial institutions of over rupees 50 crore during the period under review, means it's over rupees 50 crore. So that's the threshold one needs to check. Statutory audit of entities which have raised donations and or contributions over rupees 50 crore. So it's about, the previous one was about raising funds. This one is about raising donations or contributions of over rupees 50 crores. Then statutory audit again of entities having net worth of more than 500 crore rupees. Now we are looking at net worth as the criteria. And please mind it that we are not looking at all of these limits of a firm. We are looking at all of these limits of the audit of the client of the firm. Okay, so when we talk about practice unit, so we are talking about client of that practice unit. What's the size of that client? Statutory audit of entities which have been funded by central or state government schemes of over rupees 50 crore. Okay, entities funded by central or state government schemes. So all of these type of assurance engagements, if are done by any professional firm, will make that professional firm as level 1 practice unit. And we'll also understand what is the relevance of this segregation. We'll come to that. First of all, we need to understand which all professional firms, which all CA firms, which all practicing firms will get covered under level 1. Okay, yeah. Moving on to the next point, that is about level 2. Level 2 will cover statutory audit, internal audit, concurrent audit, systems audit, tax audit, and or departmental review of branches, offices. So we have also come down to branches, offices of public sector, private sector, foreign banks. All of these will be covered under level 2 practice units. Okay. Insurance companies, cooperative banks, statutory audit of regional rural banks, statutory audit of NBFCs, statutory audit of entities having net worth over rupees 5 crore, net worth over rupees 5 crore, or annual turnover more than rupees 50 crore. Now these are the entities which will be considered to be, or we can say these are the entities whose audit will make the professional firm or the practicing unit as level 2 practice unit. Okay, clear? All of you clear so far? Last is about level 3. It's very easy to understand. Any other assurance engagement, any other assurance service which is not covered under level 1 or level 2 will get covered under level 3. Any other assurance service simply will get covered under level 3. Very simply. Okay, yeah. So now let's try to understand what's the relevance of segregating all of these practice units into level 1, 2 or 3. See, the periodicity of the peer review will be dependent on whether a firm is level 1, 2 or 3. Means if a firm is level 1 practice unit, then every 3 years or once in every 3 years it will have to get itself peer reviewed. If a firm is level 2 practice unit, then once in every 4 years it will have to get itself practice reviewed, and for level 3 it will be once every 5 years. And you may just simply understand this, that why it would be 5 and why it would be 3 for 1. One will involve firms doing large engagements, bigger engagements, whereas level 3 is all about smaller engagements. Okay, yeah. Now over and above this, another very important point, any practice unit which is not selected for peer review may suo motu apply to the board. Which board is this? Peer review board, for the conduct of its peer review. The board shall act upon the same within 30 days from the date of receipt of the request. An auditee may request the board for the conduct of peer review of its auditor. So one is, let's suppose a firm is not selected for peer review, means it is not falling under level 1, 2 or 3, or it's not selected for peer review. Then that firm can on its own reach out to peer review board and request that I want to get myself peer reviewed. This is one. Number 2, let's suppose there is a client. So in our case there was a client, you remember, ABC Limited. Now that client can also write to the peer review board and request that the firm which audited its financial statements, should also get peer reviewed. Okay, in both the cases, board will have to act upon within 30 days from the date of receipt of application. Application means request for the peer review. Yeah. Okay. We have discussed about the periodicity. We have also discussed that this can also be suo motu be conducted if required. And the third thing is that other than the periodicity, if the board decides and maybe on the request of the practice unit, board may cut down this interval of 3, 4 or 5 years. Means the peer review can also be conducted prior to 3 years, prior to 4 years, prior to 5 years. Means let's suppose 3 years are gone and in the next 2 years peer review is required to be done. But the firm wants that in the third review itself, in the third year itself, another review should be done. So effectively they are not waiting for 5 years. They want to get it done earlier than that, which will increase the number of peer reviews conducted within a time span of 5 years, which is still okay. If the firm wants to get it done, peer review board will they can request the peer review board, and peer review board can decide and get it done prior to 5 years also. Okay. Yeah. Now let's understand about this peer review board, because we have had detailed discussions around practice unit, their categorization. We have also sort of briefly understood about the peer reviewer, though we'll understand about peer reviewer in more detail. Let's now first of all understand about the peer review board. Now what is this board? How does this come into the picture? What's the constitution and all of these things? The board is constituted by the council of the ICI. It shall consist of maximum 12 members who will be appointed by the ICI council, of whom not less than 50% shall be from the members of council. Means minimum 50% will be the council members. Okay. Council may nominate members to this board from outside bodies. And from amongst prominent individuals of high dignity and reputation, including but not limited to regulatory authorities. So they may pick up somebody, say, from income tax. They may pick up somebody, let's say, from GST. That is something which board will decide. So this nomination is also possible, and we may see persons coming in from outside this council which will become members of the peer review board. They can also be bankers, academicians, economists, legal professionals, business executives. Okay. Council shall appoint chairman, vice chairman from amongst its elected council members appointed on the board. So this is the next appointment which is required to be done. Term of the member shall be for 1 year. Term of the member for this board. Term of the member shall be for 1 year or such other period as may be prescribed by the council, which is generally 1 year. Casual vacancies on the board. So let's suppose if anybody moves out, shall be filled by the council. So if there's any casual vacancy, this will again have to be filled by the council. A member of the disciplinary committee or the disciplinary board or the committee on ethical standards or the committee on financial reporting and the review board of the ICI cannot become the member of peer review board. Now this part I would say is important. Means who all out of these cannot become the member of the peer review board. This you should mark. So they will not be getting covered They will not be considered. Okay, yeah. So this was about the peer review board. Let's now understand about the eligibility to be a reviewer. So now we are discussing about the peer reviewer. Now we'll understand about the eligibility of the peer reviewer. Who can become a peer reviewer? Peer reviewer shall be a member with at least 10 years of experience in practice. Means minimum 10 years of experience. Who is in practice as per the Chartered Accountants Act. Means practice can be for various things. We are talking about the practice as per the Chartered Accountants Act. Should have undergone requisite training as prescribed by the board. So there is a requisite training which peer review board will require for them. Should furnish a declaration as prescribed by the board at the time of acceptance of peer review appointment. Furnish a declaration. Should have signed the declaration of confidentiality. Now this is the declaration of confidentiality. Should have conducted audit of level 1 entities. Now which level 1 is this? This is not the level 1, 2, 3 which you read in relation to accounting standards. No. Please remember that all of these level 1, 2 and 3 we are very familiar with. But that is in the context of accounting standards. So in the exam, don't get confused with those level 1, 2 or 3. These are the level 1, 2 or 3 which we have just discussed in relation to practice units. Now the auditor should have conducted audit of level 1 entities. Means the level 1 entities which were covered under this level 1 criteria and not the criteria of accounting standards for at least 7 years to become eligible for conducting peer review of level 1 entities. Now if the peer reviewer wants to review level 1 practice units, if he wants to review level 1 practice units, then he should have conducted audit of level 1 entities only for at least 7 years. Because only then he will have the experience as to what all things this practice unit should have followed. Because if he would have not done that type of audit, that size of audit, then he would not be able to get into the review of such type of engagements conducted by level 1 practice units. Okay. Moving further, for being a reviewer, these things should not have been done, or you can say these are the criterias, or these are the things which can make the member or which will exclude the member from becoming a peer reviewer. Let's understand what are these points or what are these considerations. Members should not have a disciplinary action or proceedings pending against him. First, members should not have been found guilty by the council or the disciplinary board or the committee at any time. Members should not have been convicted. Members should not have been convicted by a competent court, whether within or outside India, of an offence involving moral turpitude and punishable with transportation or imprisonment. Any obligation or conflict of interest in the practice unit or its partners and personnel means he has to be independent. Yeah. A reviewer shall not accept any professional assignment from the practice unit for a period of 2 years from the date of appointment. So let's suppose there is a reviewer and there is a practice unit. Yeah, so we are talking about peer reviewer and the practice unit. Now for this year, peer review was conducted by this peer reviewer. Okay. On this date, peer reviewer was appointed. Now it should not happen that peer reviewer is getting associated with practice unit and then getting into the engagements of the practice unit. No. For another 2 years, peer reviewer should not get engaged, should not accept any professional assignment from the practice unit. Otherwise, what will happen? Otherwise, there could be a question mark in terms of the independence of the peer reviewer, which was required to be maintained when the peer reviewer would have conducted the review of practice unit. Yeah, because he may have seen the interest. He may have become interested in picking up the professional assignments from the practice unit, which may have jeopardized his interest. Okay, that's why this restriction has been placed in respect of picking up any assignment from the professional firm which is subject to peer review by the peer reviewer. Okay, yeah. Now comes another very important point and very, very relevant point also. And that is about the team. So far we have been discussing about who can be the peer reviewer, who is going to be the practice unit, what is the role, what is the objective. Now let's understand about the composition of the team. For peer review, we understand that it has to be a chartered accountant in practice, correct? Or it has to be a firm. But does it mean that only a single person wherein we can say the partner of the firm or the proprietor himself, and only that partner or the proprietor will be required to carry out this peer review? This is true. Yes, they are required to carry out the peer review because the responsibility of the peer review will be on that person. But for doing this work, reviewer is allowed to involve a qualifying assistant. He is allowed to involve a qualified assistant who will help him during the course of his review. Okay, so that means he can have a person who is going to support him for this work. Board decided in this context to clarify that a reviewer is permitted to take assistance of only one person. Who shall be a chartered accountant. So you cannot just bring in anybody. He has to be a CA. And a person who should not be disqualified. Disqualified means who would be a disqualified person as per the Chartered Accountants Act. Yeah, because anyways a disqualified person will not be allowed to involve in such type of services. The name of the qualified assistant shall be identified and intimated to the board. Name of the qualified assistant should be intimated to the board as well as the practice unit. Means the practice unit should also get to know who is that person who will accompany him, who will support this peer reviewer. That qualified assistant will also be required to sign a declaration. Now in this case, you may be thinking, sir, what is this declaration? Everywhere we have been talking about declaration. Why is this required? Where is this required? Now please understand that when the peer reviewer will review the working papers of practice unit, working papers of practice unit are confidential, isn't it? And why are they confidential? Because they contain data of ABC Limited. They contain data which is subject to confidentiality. That's why it should not happen that all of these work papers or all of these data related to this entity is not used or is misused by the peer reviewer or maybe by his assistant. And that's why a declaration has to be given by both the persons to maintain confidentiality of that data. And which is like very, very important. So independence, confidentiality are very importantly required to be maintained by any professional. Correct? Yeah. Same is the case over here. That is required to be considered and applied. And that's why a written declaration has to be given. Okay. Further, this qualified assistant shall not have direct interface either with the practice unit or the board. Means for the board, which will come over here, for the board, so we are talking about peer review board. Who is going to be the face? Peer reviewer. Who is going to be interacting with him? Peer reviewer. Similarly, with the practice unit, he is going to be the face. If there is a support staff, he will be assisting him, but he will not be directly involved in conversations with these two parties. Means this communication around various deliverables, various reporting requirements, direct interface of this person should not be there. Okay. Further, this person means this support staff, or we can say qualified assistant, which has been chosen, should be from the firm of the reviewer. Means he should be working with the reviewer for at least 1 year as a member in practice. He should be working with the reviewer for at least 1 year. It should not happen that reviewer has just hired a person and put him on this peer review. No. This person should have been working for at least 1 year with the peer reviewer. So these are the requirements which are mandatorily required to be followed by the peer reviewer. Okay. Confidentiality is something that we have discussed. So this needs to be maintained throughout the course of the review. Now let's move on to the approach of the reviewer. So we can look at the stepwise approach which may be adopted by the reviewer. Reviewer should gain an understanding of the engagement letter. Since an insurance engagement, or for that matter any kind of engagement, should begin with an engagement letter. Okay. Reviewer should focus the review primarily on the key engagement matters. He should also consider the materiality of the matter while planning the review. The number of assurance engagements to be selected requires the exercise of judgment by the reviewer based on the evaluation of replies given in the questionnaire and size of the practice unit. Objective is to obtain reasonable cross-section of the practice unit's clients through greater weight may be given to the large size clients. Okay, so let's now understand how this process will really move. See, the first step is going to be what? First step is going to be the selection of peer reviewer, selection of the practice unit by the peer review board. Okay. Then comes the next step, that is about appointment of this peer reviewer. Means who will be the peer reviewer, because as we have discussed, there is a panel which the board will have of the peer reviewers. That panel will have to be assessed. Means who will be the right person as per the assessment of the peer review board for conducting this review. Okay. Let's see now step by step as to how this process will really move. And this is something which I was telling you, that you should consider this to be more of a practical situation. So let's now try to understand how this flow of steps will work. Okay, there's a sequence to it. And if you will understand this flow, then this entire chapter you will find to be very, very simple, because this is the most important part now. This is actually the peer review that we are going to discuss now, because so far we have discussed only about all of these parties which are involved. Yeah, but now comes the process, now comes the peer review as to how it will start and how it will come to an end. First step, a practice unit which has been selected for peer review shall be notified by the board. So this practice unit will get notification from the board. Board will notify the practice unit that you have been selected for the peer review. Okay. And then name of 3 reviewers, name of 3 peer reviewers shall be recommended by the board to the practice unit, out of which practice unit will be required to select 1 peer reviewer and intimate the same to the board within 7 days of receipt of those names. And once that is done, board shall intimate the reviewer so selected and seek his consent within 7 days. So now what has happened? Board has intimated practice unit that your peer review has to start, and board will give him 3 persons. So one is A, B or C, out of which practice unit will be required to select 1 person or 1 peer review. Let's suppose they select C. So C will become the peer reviewer. Yeah, as amongst these 2 he is selected, but it's important that the board also seeks the consent of C, because C will also be required to consider whether he would like to do this peer review or not. So that's why board will reach out to C and seek his consent also. And there's a timeline everywhere. Huh? So all of these things have to be done in a timeline, because this entire peer review process cannot go on for n number of days. So there's a process, there's a timeline. So within this overall timeline, if various activities have to be completed, so all of those activities also have got timelines. Like for this process, 7 days have been given. Once this is done, for obtaining consent, 7 days have been given. Yeah, clear? Then comes the next step. Now peer reviewer has been selected, practice unit has been selected, means he has given his consent. So that's why we are saying it's final. This is also final. Now comes the next step. Practice unit shall furnish the following information to the peer reviewer. Now communication between these 2 parties will start. Communication between these 2 parties will start. Wherein practice unit will be given an option. Practice unit will be required to give following information. Duly filled in questionnaire sent by the board. So board would have sent 1 questionnaire to practice unit, and practice unit will send that questionnaire duly filled in. It will have a lot of questions in respect of peer review. So that will be filled by practice unit, sent to the peer reviewer. complete list of assurance service clients, including the nature of service provided, fees charged for the period under review. Note on the policies and procedures adopted by practice unit in relation to independence, staff supervision, development, second person review, and process generally followed in carrying out assurance services. This complete process flow maintained by the practice unit will have to be sent to the peer reviewer. Details of any proceedings against the practice unit, against any of its partners or qualified assistants, taken by any regulatory, monitoring or enforcement bodies relating to investigation or allegation of deficiency in the conduct of attest function by them during the period of 3 years preceding the period of review or at any time thereafter till the date of submission of duly filled in questionnaire. Yeah. So this information, as we have discussed, will flow from, this will flow from practice unit to peer reviewer. Now, on the basis of all of these information that the peer reviewer would have received, peer reviewer shall select a sample of assurance services that he would like to review and intimate the same to the practice unit. Peer reviewer may also seek further or additional clarification from the practice unit on the information furnished. So let's suppose if he need any clarification, if he has any doubt on this information, so that will also be sought by the peer reviewer from the practice unit. Okay, yeah. The reviewer shall plan for on-site review or initial meeting in consultation with the practice unit. The reviewer shall give the practice unit at least 15 days notice to keep ready the necessary records of the selected assurance services. The reviewer and practice unit shall mutually cooperate and ensure that the entire review process is completed within 90 days of notifying the practice unit about its selection for review. Okay. So now, on the basis of information given by practice unit to peer reviewer, he will select the assurance services. For his review, and he will then plan his work. So what's the first plan? First plan will be to visit the office, because this review will be conducted at the office of the practice unit. So you'll have to be there on site. On site means office of practice reviewer. Office of practice unit. So this complete planning will be done by the peer reviewer. Yeah. So this planning part is now completed. Planning part is now completed. So both the parties have discussed through a communication channel that they have shared the required information, and they have planned their work, and they have also considered adequate time in respect of getting the required information ready. And basically that will lie on the practice unit, because he will have to produce all the information which the peer reviewer would like to review. Okay, yeah. Then starts the execution. Execution means now the peer reviewer will come on the ground. He will start reviewing the documents. He will start reviewing the information in relation to the selected assurance service. Now please note this. Practice unit may have, let's suppose, 100 engagements during the year. It may have 100 engagements during the year. Okay. Practice reviewer will not be, peer reviewer will not be required to review all of these engagements? No. He will only select one engagement out of all of them, or out of those which were shared by practice unit to peer reviewer. Okay, and he will be looking at the documentation processes around that one engagement, which is going to be an assurance engagement. Now in this case, an immediate question may come to your mind. Sir, if the peer reviewer will do that, if he'll only review one engagement, then if we look at the objective of this peer review, that was to ensure quality by the practice unit. So can it not happen that the engagement or this assurance engagement which has been submitted by the practice unit to peer reviewer was the one wherein they have given their best of their services, best of their documentation, and for the remaining engagements they may have a very poor process, their quality may not be so good. So by checking only one engagement, how will the peer reviewer ensure that this organization as a whole is maintaining the quality standards? Is that not a problem? The answer to that will be yes. So just by checking one, we cannot say that all the processes or all the engagements of the firm would have been executed with the same quality requirements or the same quality procedures which they would have considered in relation to this engagement which is reviewed by peer reviewer. So that limitation remains. But still, if the practice unit would know that these are the criteria which they need to follow, what is the objective? Objective is to improve the process of the organization, process of the practice unit. So if the process will improve, then automatically improvements are going to come in the quality of all the engagements. Okay, yeah. And I think this also answers the question of Ambika. We say, sir, why the option is given to the practicing unit to select the peer review? Oh, it's a different question. Yes. See, the option is given because we need to understand that this is also a professional. This is also a professional firm. And it may have happened that there are certain conflicts in relation to some of the reviewers which may be empaneled with the peer review board. So that's why as a professional, he has been given an option to select one out of the three. Okay, yeah. So let's now move on to the execution part. On-site review. Now peer review will visit the office of the practice unit. This on-site review should not extend beyond 7 working days. And 7 working days will mean Monday to Friday. Yeah. So this is a time cap. This can be the maximum number of days. The reviewer is required to carry out compliance review of the following general controls around independence, around professional skills, professional standards, outside consultations which may be required by the auditor or this practice unit to maintain or to have, staff recruitment, supervision, staff development, office administration. Okay, yeah. The number of assurance service engagements to be reviewed shall depend upon standard of quality controls generally prevailing, size and nature of assurance service engagements undertaken by practice unit, methodology generally adopted by practice unit, number of partners, members involved in assurance services, number of locations, branch offices, fees charged or received by the practice unit. From the initial sample selected at the planning stage, reviewer in consultation with practice unit may reduce or enlarge the initial sample size of assurance service engagements for review. which you generally find to be 1. Review of records. The reviewer is required to adopt a combination of compliance and substantive approach. So what is this compliance approach? In terms of compliance approach, reviewer will be focused on various compliances which the practice unit should have complied with. Okay. Wherein the following areas shall be considered: assurance services records for administration, review and evaluation of systems of internal control, substantive tests, financial statements presentation, assurance service conclusions, assurance service reporting. In terms of the substantive approach, review of assurance working papers will be done in order to establish extent of compliance, whether the assurance work has been carried out as per the applicable standards or not. And the reporting is also required to be reviewed. Reporting means, in case of a statutory audit, the audit report which would have been issued by the practice unit, so that will also be required to be reviewed. The peer review report should state that the system of quality control for assurance services of the practice unit for the period under review has been designed so as to carry out assurance services in a manner that ensures compliance with required standards. Now comes the time for the report by the peer reviewer. His report means the report in relation to review of the engagement of practice unit, review of the processes of the practice unit. That should ensure that the system of quality control has been taken care of. That is something which is required to be commented upon by the peer reviewer. So let's see what all things shall be addressed by the peer review in terms of his report or in his report. The peer review report shall address his report of compliance or otherwise on the following areas of control. 1. Independence. 2. Professional skills and standards. Outside consultations. Staff recruitment, supervision, development, office administration. All of these things will have to be considered by the peer reviewer while finalizing his report. Okay. Discussions or the communications of findings. Now we have discussed about the review, we have discussed about various aspects. So in simple terms, you can say that the peer reviewer will come and he will review the audit files of the peer. That means the practice unit. Okay. Yeah. Now execution is completed. So we discussed about communications between these two, planning. Now the execution is also completed. Now comes the observations of the peer reviewer. The reviewer, before making his report and sending it to the board, shall communicate his findings, means his observations, in the preliminary report. Now as a next step, preliminary report will be prepared and that will be sent by the peer reviewer to the practice unit if in his opinion systems or procedures are deficient or non-compliant with reference to any matter that has been noticed by him, or if there are other matters where he wants to seek clarification. Now once this is completed, then what is going to be the next step? Then the next step will be to issue preliminary report. I'll just remove these two communications now. So we are saying now the peer review work is completed. Now a preliminary report will be sent by the peer reviewer to practice unit to seek clarifications. So he may have certain observations in relation to practice unit on which he will seek clarifications. And this is not a final report. This is only a preliminary report. You can say it's more of about getting understanding about some of the things which may have been missed by the practice reviewer. So it's about improving his understanding. Now the practice unit shall within 15 days after the date of receipt of findings make any submissions or representations in writing to the reviewer. And then the practice unit shall submit responses. Practice unit shall submit responses on this preliminary report. And the responses will be given to peer reviewer. So far, you would have seen that there is no communication currently going on between the board or the peer reviewer or the practice unit or the peer review board. Okay, yeah. At the end of the on-site review, now we can say in a way review has ended, because these clarifications were also part of the review. It may not have been completed on site, but still it's part of the review. So now we can say review has come to an end. If the reviewer is satisfied with the reply received from practice unit, now he will check the responses. Reviewer will submit peer review report to the board along with his initial findings, response of the practice unit. Okay, and a copy of this report shall be forwarded to practice unit. Now what will happen? He will give his report to the board, and along with this report, he will also attach these responses. These responses will also be attached, which will go out to the peer review board on the preliminary report. Then he will also send this report to the practice unit. Okay. Now this report has been sent by the reviewer to both the parties, practice unit as well as the peer review board. It has gone out to both the parties. In case the reviewer is of the opinion that the response by the practice unit is not satisfactory. Okay, this was the case when the responses were found to be satisfactory by the peer reviewer. He did this. Let's suppose responses were not to satisfaction. Even in that, the reviewer will submit a report. This report may be with modifications to the board, incorporating his reasons. Modification means his observations. The reviewer shall also submit initial findings, means the preliminary report, response by the practice unit, and the manner in which responses have been dealt with. And copy of the report shall also be forwarded to practice unit. Okay. We are saying whether peer reviewer is satisfied or dissatisfied with these responses, he will submit the report to both the parties. It's just one point. In case he is dissatisfied, then he will put down his observations in relation to all of these matters or all of other matters in this report. That's why we are saying this to be a modified report. Modified report means it contains observations. And of course, he will attach preliminary report and the responses, these two, while giving this to the board. In case of a modified report, means this second situation, Board shall order for a follow-on review after a period of 1 year from the date of issue of report as mentioned in B above. If the board so decides, the period of 1 year may be reduced but shall not be less than 6 months. Let's suppose if peer reviewer has not given a clean report, means a modified report has gone out, then what will happen? Board will require another peer review to be conducted in relation to this practice unit after 1 year from the date of that modified report. Okay, and this may be cut down to 6 months, but not less than 6 months. Means practice unit should now get ready for another review. Not immediately, but within 1 year. If everything would have been clean, then the practice unit would have received peer review certificate. In case it's not there, it's not clean, then practice unit will have to come out clean. They will have to showcase that the quality has been involved, or they have performed the engagement with the quality procedures which are required to be maintained by the board. Okay, yeah, all of you clear on this? Inherent limitations of review. So let's understand some of the inherent limitations of review. The reviewer conducts the review in accordance with statement on peer review. The review would not necessarily disclose all the weaknesses in compliance of technical standards, maintenance of quality of assurance services, since it would be based on selective tests. As there are inherent limitations in the effectiveness of any system of quality control, which happens to be the subject matter of review, departure from the system may occur and may not be detected. As we have discussed, that there are limitations, but still, even with the limitations, something is required to be done. Now we can also look at a checklist which will be helpful in relation to the audit program of a practice unit. This would illustrate the contents of audit program of a reviewee practice unit. Practice unit is this one, which will be subject to review, not the practice reviewer. For the guidance of the reviewer, appointment letter, relevant resolution for appointment, terms of the engagement, including reports required, manner of determining audit fees, system of bookkeeping, list of books of accounts maintained by the entity, particulars of the promoters, directors and their past. So all of these information will be required to be maintained by them. Names of the persons who write the books of accounts and who authorized them. Memorandum and articles of association, partnership deed as applicable. Details of business of client, its accounting systems, by reviewing and assessing information on nature of the business of the entity. Internal control system, including owner or manager controls. Statement of P&L, balance sheet, auditors, directors report of the previous year and reports of the internal auditor. Analytical review procedures in order to identify areas of accounts which are important, highlight unusual or unexpected figures. Yeah, so you can see all of the procedures related to audit have been captured over here. Assessment of audit risk, preliminary estimates of materiality, classes of accounting transactions. Classes of accounting transactions means flow of transactions, processes, selection of representative samples, compliance tests to evaluate reliability of key controls, material weaknesses in the controls, performance of analytical review procedures, fundamental accounting assumptions, whether those have been followed or not, disclosure of changes in accounting policies wherever it was there. Audit report is received from all branch auditors. Working papers contain all audit evidence, means the documentation. Summary of work done, again the documentation. Review by senior in charge of the work. So was it that a single person was doing the audit, or was it that over and above single person, there was somebody who was reviewing these files. Yeah, so that would improve the quality. So one person is checking, then again there is a senior person who is reviewing the work of this person who is checking the files or who is involved in the execution. Updation of audit working papers, including permanent records. So wherever there are permanent records, if there are any updates, it's very, very important to update them. Review of unadjusted errors to assess, are they leading to any material misstatement? Compliance with regulatory requirements, compliance with accounting standards, compliance with auditing standards, post balance sheet events, drafting of audit opinion, comparison of budgets with the actuals, complete staff evaluation forms, planning of next year's audit. Okay, yeah. So all of these things, all of these aspects are required to be considered, and that's why we can see this sort of checklist. Now this flowchart is also available to all of you, though we have just gone through all of these processes, all of these points in a flow, but this flowchart you can just read later on. This is also available in the study material in case you find this to be not so visible right now. So this is a detailed flowchart which covers each and every aspect of the peer review, and this has been given in a very nice manner which will help you to understand all of these aspects of the peer review that we have discussed. Okay, yeah, all of you clear on this? So what we can do is we can now take a break of 10 minutes. After the break, we'll continue with this chapter, but we'll discuss some examples. Okay, yeah. So let's take a break for 10 minutes, and after the break, we'll discuss some examples based on whatever we have covered, and after that we'll move on to quality review. Yeah. Jay? Hi, welcome back. So we can now start our discussion on the next topic, and I think we can just get on to this next topic first of all, and maybe after completing this topic we can come back to the questions around peer review, around this quality review in a combined manner. I'm also considering the time that it may happen that by picking up the questions we may lose out some time on quality review, so that's why it's better. Okay, so now talking about the quality review, this is also a similar type of review, or you can say broadly this is also a review wherein two firms will get involved, and one of the firm will be reviewing the work of another firm. So let's quickly understand what do we mean by this. Quality means doing it right way. Okay, that is all about understanding and ensuring the quality procedures. So let's see the scope of this quality review. Examining whether the engagement partner has ensured compliance with applicable technical standards, other applicable professional ethical standards or not. Examining whether the engagement partner has ensured compliance with rules and regulations. Examining whether the firm has implemented SQC1, that is about system of quality control. In fact, this standard is considered to be the very basis which is required to be maintained or which is required to be ensured in terms of quality procedures by each and every professional firm. Now, what are going to be those technical standards in the context of the quality review? Accounting standards, framework for the preparation of the financial statements, quality control and engagement standards, that is all about our auditing standards, and the standards on the quality, guidance notes on the accounting or the auditing matters which are issued by the ICI, notification, directions, guidelines which are issued by the council of the ICI, code of ethics, which is again very importantly required to be considered. Now presently the reviews which are undertaken by the quality review board, now similar to peer review board, we have quality review board over here. We can just try to change some of these facts. So now as against peer review board, and we can change this header also. We have quality review board. Okay, and we can just change these names later on. For the time being, these names are kept same, but these will change. The review undertaken by quality review board covers statutory audit services only, and it does not extend to internal audit services. Covers only statutory audit services. These are proposed to be covered by the board at a later stage, means internal audit services. So let's quickly understand about the constitution of this quality review board. This has been set up by central government under the CA Act, and the first quality review board was constituted by the notification dated 28 June 2007. And this board will comprise of chairperson, 10 other members, wherein the members should include the persons who are of experience, significant experience in the field of law, economics, business, finance, accountancy. Okay, yeah. Let's understand now the functions of the quality review board. A quality review carried out by quality review board is directed towards inspection, evaluation of audit quality, adherence to various statutory and other regulatory requirements. Yeah. What all things are required to be assessed in this process or in this review? Quality of compliance with accounting standards, disclosure requirements, quality of audit and reporting by the practitioner, quality control framework like we have just discussed. Let's understand about all of these requirements. Review quality of services performed by the members. Make recommendations to the council for quality of services. guide the members to improve the quality of services and adherence to various statutory and regulatory requirements. So what are the powers? To facilitate the discharge of its functions, the rules, okay, the relevant rules, I'm not getting into the names of those rules, provide that where the board does not receive the information called for by it from any member of the institute, the board may request the institute to obtain the information from the member and furnish the same to the board. Okay, yeah. So what are the procedures which are required to be followed by the board? The board may, on its own or through any specialized arrangement set up under the institute, evaluate and review the quality of work and the services provided by the members, lay down the procedure or evaluate criteria to evaluate various services provided by the members, call for information from the institute, the council or its committees, members, clients, or other persons in such form or in such other manner as it may decide. Invite experts to provide expert or technical advice wherever it is required. Make recommendations to the council, because that's the most important aspect which are involved in these processes, whether we talk about peer review or whether we talk about quality reviews. Now, as we discussed, that herein also review is performed. Now the board has changed, but there are two more parties which are required to be involved. So let's understand the process. In this case, firms will be selected who would have carried out statutory audits. So let's see the selection of the audit firms. Selection of the audit firm can be based on the financial statements of the enterprise. Yeah. So under this category or under this stage, when the selection is on the basis of financial statements of the enterprise, audited accounts of companies having wider public interest can be one of the criteria, such as listed companies. So audit of listed companies can be one of the criteria. Audit of insurance companies, because they have wider public interest. NBFCs, unlisted PSUs, asset management companies may be selected by QRP. So this may select any of these types of engagements. And this may be select either suo moto or random selection on account of being a part of sector otherwise identified as susceptible to risk. Means if there is a sector in which board sees that there's a lot of risk which is involved, so that can also be one of the criteria for selection of an engagement. Regulatory concerns pointing towards shareholders' risks. So if there are any regulatory concerns around it, if there are any reported frauds or likelihood of any fraud, so that can also be one of the criteria. Serious accounting irregularities which may be reported in the media or some other reports, but which will again be analyzed by the board. So it's not just that they will pick up the news and they will just select it. So they will also analyze it. But that can be one of the basis for their coverage as far as selection is concerned. Major non-compliance with provisions related to disclosures. Reference made to it by any regulatory body. For example, it could be RBI, SEBI, ADA, MCA. Yeah, so if any of the references are made by any of these bodies, so that can also be one of the criteria for selection of this audit engagement. Okay. Another criteria is based on audit firms which are auditing the accounts. Now this may be made for review of their work on random basis, wherein the volume of the work handled by those firms representing the number and the nature of the clients could be assessed. Their involvement in the sectors that may be identified as facing high risk, as well as on account of their reported involvement in fraud or likelihood of fraud. So for example, let's suppose there is a firm which has been covering a major proportion of one of the sectors. So for example, in FMCG, there's a single firm which has been auditing 30 to 40% of the clients in that particular sector. So their involvement is huge. And let's suppose FMCG is one sector wherein a lot of risks are assessed, wherein fraudulent aspects have been considered. So that can be one of the criteria for selection of that particular type of engagement for the quality review. Okay, yeah. Then we move on to this process, quality review process. So we can say it's an engagement that needs to be carried out in a manner that ensures quality standards to be performed by the firm which has been performing that engagement. And various aspects that are required to be considered, though we have already talked about it, so that's why I'm not getting into detail of that once again. Now let's move into the stages which are involved in conduct of quality review engagements. First, selection of the audit firm and technical reviewer. Now in this case, instead of practice unit, we have audit firm. Or you can say, you can just simply replace practice unit with audit firm. And instead of peer reviewer, we have technical reviewer. Instead of peer reviewer, we have technical reviewer. Okay, yeah. So this is the first thing which is required to be considered. Now, similar to peer review, we can now see three bodies are involved or three parties are involved. One, QRB, second is audit firm, third is technical reviewer. And similar to peer review, audit firm will become subject to review by the technical reviewer. So now again, what do we need to do? We need to check as to which audit firm will be selected and which of its engagement will be selected. Some of those criteria we have discussed. And the second aspect will be about considerations of the technical reviewer. Technical reviewer to convey his acceptance of letter of engagement by sending necessary declarations for meeting eligibility conditions and furnishing statement of confidentiality. The technical reviewer first of all will convey his acceptance around this engagement, because only when he is consented, then he can be involved in the review process. And similar to peer review, QRB will also have a panel wherein multiple technical reviewers will be involved, and one out of them will be selected who will also have to give his consent. Intimation to the audit firm about the proposed quality review and acceptance of assignment by the technical reviewer. Also marking a copy of intimation to the technical reviewer. Technical reviewer to send the specified quality review program general questionnaire to the audit firm for filling up and call for additional information. Then technical reviewer will visit the office of the audit firm by fixing the date. Technical reviewer will then send the preliminary report and audit firm will submit the representation. Technical reviewer to submit the final report like we have seen in that case. And technical reviewer should also send a copy of their final report to the audit firm. Yeah. Quality review group. Then the quality review group will come into the picture, which will consider the report of the technical reviewer and the responses of the audit firm on that report, on the basis of which recommendations will be made to the quality review board. So we can say a quality review group is also involved in this process. Quality review board will consider the review report of the quality review group and decide the further course of action. So I'm not getting into the objectives because I think we have discussed this quite a lot. But one aspect which is very importantly required to be discussed is about the independence and qualifications of technical reviewers. Again, if you look at this process, technical reviewer will get access to the information of the audit firm. And through the audit firm, he will also get access to the information of the auditee, which would have been audited by the audit firm, which is considered to be confidential. So all of this information is confidential. So that's why it's first of all very, very important to maintain confidentiality. And secondly, because it's a kind of review, that's why it's very, very important that technical reviewer is independent in this entire process. And for this purpose, they are also required to give the declaration. And let's get on to the qualifications. For being a technical reviewer, what are the qualifications? What are the qualifications? First, a member should not have disciplinary proceeding under CA Act pending against him or her, or any disciplinary action under the CA Act, or any penal action under any other law. So this is first criteria. A member or his firm or any of the network firm or any of the partners of the firm or that of the network firm should not have been the statutory auditor of the company as specified, or have rendered any other services to the said company entity during the last 3 financial years. So now we are saying there's a company whose audit or audit of financial statements of this company would have been performed by the audit firm. Now we are saying that the technical reviewer should be independent of this company also. Yeah, it's very important that he should be independent of this company also. Only then he will be able to give unbiased report in respect of his review. Next criteria. A member or his firm or any of the network firms or any of the partner of the firm or that of the network firm should not have had any association with the specified statutory audit firm during the last 3 financial years and or thereafter. So one is, he should, or all of these persons should be independent of this company. They should also be independent of this audit firm. Fourth, a member should comply with all the eligibility conditions laid down for appointment as an auditor under the Companies Act, which apply mutatis mutandis in respect of review of quality of statutory audit. So if you remember, there are certain conditions for qualification for appointment as statutory auditor of a company. So same requirements will be required to be considered in respect of this technical reviewer. Means he should also have all of those qualifications. Only then he can be considered for this technical review. Okay, yeah. Empanelment of technical reviewers. The board decided the following criteria for empanelment of technical reviewers with the board during the financial year 15-16. Let's see what's the criteria which they have considered for 15-16. Reviewers should have minimum 15 years of post-qualification experience and should be currently in practice of accounting and audit. 1. Reviewers should have handled as a signing partner or proprietor at least 3 statutory audit engagements as a central statutory auditor of banks or public limited companies or government companies or private limited companies having annual turnover of rupees 50 crore and above. Annual turnover of 50 crore and above during the last 10 financial years. Provided that out of the aforesaid 3 statutory audits, at least one must be in respect of entities other than private limited. At least one must be other than private limited. So that means all the 3 should not be of private limited. At least one should be other than private. Means at least one should be either public limited company or government company or a bank, as we can see over there. In case all the three will be private limited, then what will happen? He will not be empaneled. Understood? Yeah. Reviewer should not have any disciplinary proceeding under the Chartered Accountant Act pending against him or any disciplinary action under the Chartered Accountant Act during the last 3 financial years. Reviewer should not currently be a member of QRB or Central Council of the ICI or Regional Council or the branch level management committee. So in case he happens to be member of any of these bodies or you can say the committees, then he cannot be a member of QRB. Sorry, he cannot be a technical reviewer. Member, Central Council, Regional Council. Okay. If in the past, let's suppose, if reviewer was a member of QRB in the past, if he was member of the council in the past, it would not really impact his empanelment. But currently, when it was going on, means the empanelment was going on, means the currently he should not be the member. Okay, yeah. So this was about the requirements related to who can be a technical reviewer, around his qualifications and all of these things. Now, similar to peer review, let's also understand the requirements related to on-site visit and support staff. You remember in case of peer review, one qualified assistant was available to the peer reviewer who could help him in that entire process. Yeah. So let's understand both of these points. Technical reviewers could undertake maximum of 1 on-site visit, which should not extend beyond 7 days. If you remember, it was 7 working days over there. And in case it exceeds beyond that, in the exceptional circumstances, then the prior approval of the chairperson of the quality review board will be required, in which case it cannot extend beyond 14 days. Means it can be doubled up, but that will require prior approval. And for doing this on-site visit or for carrying out this quality review, assistance of not more than 3 assistants can be taken. Now, in case of peer review, if you remember, it was only 1 qualified assistant. But in case of quality review, they are saying 3 can be taken. 3 assistants can be taken, but it cannot be more than 3 assistants. Means up to 3 can be taken. For whom there is again a qualification criteria. And this qualification criteria we are talking about qualified assistant. Which have to be less than 3 in number. They have to be less than 3 in number, or it can be up to 3. Sorry, up to 3 in number. Yeah. So let's see what are their qualification requirements. First, they should be chartered accountant. Second, they should not be disqualified. Of course, that's very, very important, because if they will be disqualified under the CA Act, they cannot be involved in the professional services. They shall have to sign the confidentiality statement. You remember the declaration and all? If he is required to give the declaration, they will also be doing the same thing what he is doing. So that's why all of those declarations of confidentiality, independence are required to be maintained by these qualified assistants also. They shall have no direct interface. Again, similar to what we see in case of peer review. No direct interface with the peer review, or with the audit firm, or with the quality review board. Should have been working with the firm. Which firm? This firm of technical reviewer. Now, this technical reviewer is also a firm. So qualified assistant or assistants should have been working with them for at least 1 year as a member or partner in the CA firm with them. Yeah. Should not have been associated with the statutory auditor or the audit firm under review and company or the entity selected during the last 3 financial years. Now, if you remember, technical reviewer was required to be independent of this company as well as firm. Same way, this qualified assistant or these qualified assistants should also be independent of these 2 parties. And for that matter, they are saying that they should not have been associated with either of them during the last 3 financial years. Okay? Yeah? Confidentiality is something that we have discussed. Now we can move on to the stage-wise approach of this quality review process, something that we have already discussed in brief. So let's understand all of those steps. Board will first of all constitute 1 or more quality review groups. These groups will be constituted to conduct preliminary reviews of general purpose financial statements with a view to assessing quality of audit and reporting by the auditors in consultation with the board. There could be 2 categories of the review groups, industry specific and generic. Okay. Then each of the review group would be assisted by technical reviews who may be an outsourced service provider. Outsourced means who are not from this group itself, who are from outside. The job of technical reviewer would be to prepare report on review of general purpose financial statements to assist this group in terms of ensuring their objective. What was the objective? To ensure or to assess the quality of audit, reporting by the auditors, review of quality control framework. The report which will be prepared by the technical reviewer means these reviewers will be considered by the review group, and that will also be consulted with the quality review board on which a final conclusion will then be made. The report of the review group shall state the following. What? Description of non-compliance with any of the matters, description of evidence that support in terms of the non-compliances and their recommendations in respect of any particular matter. The technical reviewer, after completion of his review, is required to submit a preliminary report to the audit firm on the review of quality of the audit and reporting by the auditors in the general purpose financial statements within a specified period of time. Okay. Now this entire process is moving in the same manner. Technical reviewer is reviewing the financial statements, reviewing the reporting which the audit firm would have conducted, all of these things. Evaluation of findings, the next step. Technical reviewer or the quality review team may note a non-compliance with 1 or more standards on the auditing or accounting standards or the disclosure requirements. Whenever any such finding is noted, what will happen? The reviewers team are required to evaluate the finding in the light of responses given by the engagement team. What is the engagement team? This team. Materiality of the item means how significant is that matter. Accounting or auditing practices which should have been followed in the context of the audit client. If the findings are related to non-compliance with the procedures as per auditing standards, whether the engagement team carried out alternate procedures or not. Okay, yeah. The responses which would be given by the engagement team, who is the engagement team? This team, this audit firm, are also important to determine the extent of non-compliance, because at times it may happen that they have certain findings, but they could not get the perspective, they could not get the complete understanding of the facts or the situations which were relevant in the context of that matter, and the extent of non-compliance which they might have observed could not be so high, which may be diluted after discussions with the audit firm, because they would be knowing the best, they would be having the best understanding about that situation or the understanding of the client. Now comes the next part, and that is about reporting and other procedures. The reviewer is required to submit a preliminary report to the audit firm on the review of quality of audit and reporting by auditors, means on their report which they would have given. Within the specified period of time before submitting the final report to the board. The board may, however, extend this timeline. The reviewer, based upon his satisfaction from the representation by the audit firm, may decide to issue either an interim report or final report to the board. So first of all, a preliminary report will go. First of all, a preliminary report will go. First of all, a preliminary report will go on which they will share their responses. And again, this is something similar to what you see in case of peer review. On the basis of these responses, technical reviewer may consider giving an interim report or the final report to the quality review group or the quality review board. The reviewer should adhere to principal requirements mentioned while preparing his report. Reviewers, based on the conclusions drawn from the review, shall issue a preliminary report and subsequently the final report, a clean report. Now this final report, which will go out from the technical reviewer to the QRB, may be clean or may have certain observations. Clean report indicates that the reviewer is of the opinion that affairs are conducted in a manner that ensures quality of services rendered. And the reviewer may also give modified report, which is called as qualified report, which could be because of any of these reasons. And what can be the reasons? Non-compliance of technical standards, relevant laws or regulations, ethical requirements, deficiencies in the internal control procedures, or adequate training programs of the staff. All of these things, now you would have seen these are getting repeated at multiple places, because these could be the only areas of non-compliance, because these are the things which the audit firm would have been required to consider in respect of their audit. Let's see some of the basic elements of the reviewer's report. The report should contain elements relating to audit quality of companies. First, a reference to the description of the scope. A reference to the description of the scope of the review and period of review of audit firm conducted along with existence of limitations. Statement indicating instances of lack of compliance with technical standards, other professional or ethical standards. Statement indicating instances of lack of compliance with relevant laws and regulations. So this will be about elements related to audit quality of companies. Then comes the next part, that is about elements relating to quality control framework, which would have been adopted by audit firm in relation to its audit of financial statements of the companies, which will cover an indication of whether the firm has implemented system of quality control or not. That is all about SQC1. Statement indicating that system of quality control is responsibility of the reviewed firm. Who is the reviewed firm here? Audit firm. An opinion on whether the reviewed firm's system of quality control has been designed to meet the requirements of quality control standards or not. Where the reviewer concludes that modification in the report is necessary, description of reasons for the modification. and he should also contain the suggestions. Modification means where the reviewer believes there are some observations, there are some problems, so he will include those observations, but he will also include the suggestions, because the end objective is what? If you remember, end objective of these reviews are not to find problems, not to find deficiencies, but to bring in the improvements, for which suggestions are important. A reference to the preliminary report. In case the preliminary report was given on which the responses were received, then the references of that report is also required to be given, so that it can be understood in terms of the clarifications which would have been required by the technical reviewer, on the basis of which he could enhance his understanding about the matter, about the organization, about the client, about all of these scoping which would have been considered by the audit firm. An attachment which describes the quality review conducted, including an overview and information on planning and performing the review. The quality review report should be issued on the reviewer's individual letterhead. Means it has to be properly signed on the letterhead of the reviewer. It should be addressed to the board, because it's meant for the board, and should be dated as of the date of conclusion of the review, when the review was concluded. So that is when this report is required to be issued. Okay, yeah. Then comes the next point, that is about type of report to be issued. Type of report to be issued. In deciding on the type of report to be issued, a reviewer shall consider evidence obtained, shall document overall conclusions in respect of following matters: policies and procedures that constitute the reviewed firm's system of quality control, whether the personnel of the reviewed firm complied with such policies and procedures, whether the independence of audit firm is maintained in conducting the audit, whether the firm has instituted adequate mechanism for training of staff. And we are talking about this audit firm. In respect of all of these points, we are talking about this audit firm, because this is subject to quality review. Whether the audit firm ensures availability of expertise, experienced individuals wherever required, whether the skill and competence of assistants are considered necessary, whether that has been considered by the audit firm or not. Just give me 1 minute. Whether the progress of attestation service is monitored and the work performed by each assistant is reviewed by the service in charge. Means if any team member is, let's suppose, testing any area and he's preparing the work paper, so there should be a senior who should be reviewing the work of that person. By doing this, what will happen in case this person who is checking anything, he misses out something, then the senior would be able to guide him and will be able to help him improve on his audit procedure by ensuring that the part which has been missed out has been corrected. Yeah. So by doing this, what will happen? The quality of the audit will improve. So all of these things have to be a part of the process, the systems of the audit firm. So whether all of those systems existed or not, and which is again possible by adequately training the staff, by having the competent staff, by having the experienced personnel, and wherein required experts were engaged or not. We have some illustrative qualifications which also talks about non-compliance with standards of auditing at certain places. So let's look at those illustrative qualifications now. Independence declaration from the audit members received on sign-off date of the auditor's report, or that was not received at all. Now, I'm not sure whether you have seen this practice or not, but this is something which is considered to be mandatory. Let's suppose there is a statutory audit of, say, PQR Limited, wherein a team of 5 persons has been designed, which will be carrying out that audit. Now, this company ABC Limited, this company PQR Limited may have certain members, may have certain directors with whom any of the team member may have a relationship. If that will happen, so will that team member be considered to be independent of this organization? No. It may happen that one of the if that situation will happen, or if that will be the situation, can we say that the team member or the audit team will be independent of this organization? Or at least that audit team member will be independent of this company? The answer is no. Now, all of these things are there in our code of ethics. Many of these things are also coming from the requirements of Companies Act. There are various laws and regulations which will cover all of these things. But it becomes important that audit firm, before conducting an audit, takes care of all of these ethical requirements, for which they need to obtain an independence confirmation from every team member. In writing, every team member will sign a declaration, will sign the independence in respect of the client which he has been auditing. Because if they will give that declaration, they will be taking the responsibility on themselves that they are not giving any false declaration, false independence confirmation. Now, this is a very, very important process which should have been completed before the start of the engagement. But what were the deficiencies which were noted? That even though these confirmations were obtained, but these were not obtained at the beginning of the engagement. These were obtained while the engagement was going on, or maybe when the sign-off was happening, or in certain cases not obtained at all, which is a huge risk on the part of the audit firm in respect of the audit which has been carried out. Because if any of the member was not independent and which the audit firm did not get to know, then this entire audit engagement exercise may not be considered to be of the quality of the one which is required to follow the ethical requirements, legal requirements. Okay, yeah. Let's look at another observation. No process of maintaining standard checklists, manuals, working papers to ensure consistency in the quality of each engagement. Many organizations, means many firms, keep checklists to audit certain areas. Now, how will this checklist help? Let's suppose for audit of property, plant and equipment, 10 procedures are required to be followed. And let's suppose this task has been assigned to a team member who doesn't know all the 10 procedures. He knows only 2 procedures. So what will he do? When he will audit PPE, he will be able to apply only 2 procedures. 8 will not be applied because he doesn't have the knowledge, which may eventually be known to the audit partner, or which may eventually get covered in case this audit team member gets his working papers reviewed by another senior audit team member. But at times it may also not happen if that process is missing, or it may get missed in respect of some of the areas of the team member. But if the firm will have a practice to have a checklist in respect of all the procedures, in relation to all the areas, or at least in relation to the key areas or the significant areas, then even though audit team member will not be knowing the procedure, but he will be able to now have access to this checklist, and he will then be able to understand that only 2 procedures were known to him, and the remaining 8 procedures he will be able to read from the checklist and understand from the checklist, or maybe he can consult on those other procedures even if he is not able to understand from the other team members, who will then guide him so that he is able to apply all the 10 procedures. So there will be a standard audit procedure which will be followed in respect of all the audit engagements which the firm will be doing. Secondly, the quality of the audit has improved. Yeah. And the team member should also have this documentation in respect of the procedures that would have performed. And the documentation has to be in the form of working papers. Correct? Documentation has to be in the form of working papers. If the documentation would not be completed, therein again, it will be considered to be non-compliance of auditing standards. Correct? Next, no audit evidences for evaluation of estimates made by the management. Audit evidence is what? Audit procedure. And audit procedure is reflected by audit documentation. So in certain areas, it was seen that for estimates, which is considered to be a very critical area. Remember, we discussed about audit estimates, which is considered to be very critical area, very critical component of the financial statements. There were no audit evidences. Maybe the audit procedures were not performed, or maybe those were performed, but the documentation was missing, which is again very, very serious. No presentations were made to the audit committee about the audit plan, audit strategy, audit findings. You would be remembering one essay that was about communications of the auditor to those charged with governance, which involve various steps, and which include various points in terms of the communications from the auditor to those charged with governance. Many a times this has been observed that auditors are not having any communications with those charged with governance, or even if they are having, it's not the complete communication which should be done, which again shows lack of quality, because audit committee is a very important committee. We should be knowing about the audit process, which is responsible for the supervision of the audit. And if the communications will not be made to them, then they will not be able to get into the improvements. Next, it was difficult to conclude whether fraud risk factors were considered during the audit of company's financial statements. Audit process in relation to fraud inquiry procedures were not performed and hence not documented. Fraud risk is required to be very, very carefully analyzed, assessed by the audit team, because this is one of the areas due to which material misstatement can arise and which cannot really be prevented by the auditor. Yeah. So the expectation here again is not to get into the detection, not to get into the investigation, but certain basic procedures which the essay also require the auditor to perform. It's been observed in many cases that those have not been considered in relation to the fraud risk factors, in relation to the procedures which are required to address this risk. That is again one of the known compliance which has been observed. Okay, yeah. Next, no hard copies were kept for identification to obtain sufficient appropriate audit evidence for all the subsequent events up to the date of auditor's report that requires adjustments, disclosures in the financial statements. So it's all about documentation again. In relation to the subsequent events, it was not properly available, or the documentation was not available, which is again considered to be a very important procedure on the part of the auditor, because there could be various significant events which may arise subsequently. Subsequently means subsequent to the balance sheet date, but up to the date of the auditor's report, which may require adjustments, or if not adjustments, the disclosures in the financial statements, both of which are important, but those were found to be missing. Yeah. No confirmation of balances were obtained pertaining to debtors, creditors, advances, related parties. Again, these were some of the observations. Management representation letters were obtained for general points covering the financial statements, not on other specific points of the financial statements. General point means about the inventory valuation, about how the fixed assets are measured, how the policies related to provisioning, etc. have been done. But there could be certain specific points in relation to the adjustments which the management might have made. Maybe during the year, some of the critical estimates were made by the management. Some of the significant judgments have been applied on the basis of which financial statements have been prepared. Maybe there are certain uncorrected misstatements which have not crossed the threshold of the materiality, but which are important on the part of the management to specifically represent to the auditor by including that in the management representation letter. So all of these points were not captured appropriately or not captured at all in the management representation letters. These were again some of the things which were observed. Yeah. Some of the illustrative qualifications in relation to non-compliance with accounting standards. Some of them are: significant accounting policies did not include disclosures of policies in relation to recognition of insurance claims, accounting of leases, treatment of IPO expenses. So generally for the accounting policies, what do you see? Management will copy paste the accounting policies from their last year financial statements. If it's a new company, they will copy paste it from some other company. And some of the important policies may have been missed. Some of the important policies management may not want to include. So they may think that it is only about documenting some policies, and they may not be knowing that each and everything in relation to preparation of financial statements, which is considered to be a policy, is required to be covered. And that's why many important policies may get missed. And this is again one of the non-compliance which has been observed. Inventory of traded goods was not shown separately from that of finished goods. So in case an entity is into both the businesses or both the types of activities, trading as well as manufacturing, the inventory has to be shown separately. That's the requirement of the accounting standard. That's the requirement of Schedule 3. But again, this presentation was not done properly. This disclosure requirement around these two things were not done properly. Accounting policy on revenue recognition did not capture the point of recognition where significant risk and rewards were transferred. Now this is in the context of accounting standard, because you may be thinking, sir, why we are talking about significant risk and reward now? Because now we have Ind AS 115, which talks about transfer of control. Because all of these observations are related to the past years, so that's why in the past years we can see observations related to the accounting standards and not to the not in relation to the Ind AS, which are in pipeline. So as we move forward, we'll keep getting the qualifications or the matters in relation to Ind AS also. But in relation to accounting standard, I would say on the revenue recognition, there have been various non-compliances. And all of those non-compliances are considered to be very, very serious, because revenue is considered to be a very important area in the financial statements. So if anything around revenue goes wrong, that may have a serious consequences in respect of maintaining the quality aspects in the audit of financial statements. Okay. Next is about amount provided for diminution in value of investments was not disclosed. So what will happen? Investments will be shown by a net amount. Let's suppose investment amount was 100, diminution was 10, only 90 will be shown. So disclosure or the presentation will not reflect that some provision has come in. Only 90 net amount is visible. So nobody will get to know that there was an investment which has diminished in terms of its value, which is again not a proper disclosure, not a proper presentation. Yeah. Disclosures related to previous year figures in regard to related parties were not given. Now comparatives are important. So if there are related party transactions which have been reported, then disclosure should not be limited to the current year's numbers. Comparative should also be given. And at times this has been observed as a matter of non-compliance in relation to accounting standards. Okay. Next, there was no distinction between internally generated intangible assets and other intangible assets. Non-disclosure and policy was not in line with requirements of AS 26. So one, we are saying there was no distinction. Secondly, we were saying that disclosure requirements were not fulfilled properly. Secondly, we are saying even if there was a policy for intangible assets, that policy was not in line with what AS 26 requires. AS 26 is in relation to accounting of intangible assets. So if the company has to draft any accounting policy, which is on Indian GAAP, that has to be as per AS 26. And there was a non-compliance which was observed in this case. Okay. On the quality control framework, let's see what was observed. Failure to implement various elements of system of quality control was the most common finding. And I can tell you this is a big problem in relation to various audit firms. Was the most common finding. Other findings included failure to set the criteria for determining the need for safeguards to reduce the familiarity threat to an acceptable level when using the same senior personnel on an assurance engagement over a long period of time. Failure to establish policies and procedures designed to provide reasonable assurance that the firm and its personnel comply with relevant ethical requirements. Failure to establish policies and procedures designed to provide with reasonable assurance that the firm has sufficient personnel with the capabilities, competence, commitment to ethical principles. Yeah. Now, how does it really come? See, every organization should focus on few things. One, to have the right number of people. Let's suppose they have 10 engagements and on 10 engagements 20 persons are required and the firm is only having 15 people. So what will happen? Quality will be suffered. Second, other than the number of the personnel required, the skill set is very important. And these days the skill set should also be very industry specific. Maybe the team has the right skill set, the knowledge about the real estate sector, but they may not have the knowledge to audit some of the companies, let's suppose into aviation sector. So either the training should be imparted to them or they should be having a mix of the personnel or mix of the team or mix of the members who can help both the teams in terms of their audit procedures. Otherwise, what will happen? The audit quality will be suffering. So we can also look at the comparative number of findings in reviews conducted during 2012 to 15 and 2015-16. So the number of findings which you can see from 12 to 15 was significantly lower than what was found in 2015-16 itself. So you can see the number of findings has increased significantly, which is again a matter of concern, which is again very, very importantly required to be addressed. Consideration of the reports of the review groups. So the review group's the review group's report on the quality of audit by the auditor of PSU should be furnished to the Office of CAG. Office of CAG means Office of the Comptroller and Auditor General of India on case-to-case basis, and the CAG's views, if any, shall be put up before the board along with the report of the review group. In all the cases other than this, review group's report along with the decision of the board on the quality of the audit by the auditor of a PSU should be furnished to the Office of CAG for information. The report of the review groups on the quality of audit by the auditors of enterprises, means other than those which are covered up, shall be placed before the board for its consideration directly. Okay, so that's the process which has to move. The board may, after due consideration of the report and the comments of the Office of CAG, where applicable, okay, in the first instance, means in this first instance. Where applicable means in the first instance, in the first case, decide whether the recommendation made by the review group should be accepted or otherwise. The board may suo motu, means on its own, take such further action as it may deem appropriate. If the board decides against the recommendations made by the review group. What is the review group? This is the review group. In its report, the board shall record the reasons for doing so, actions to be recommended by the board. The board had specified the format for the final report and the quality review program general questionnaire containing the questions concerning various aspects of the audit firm, such as quality control, ethical requirements, independence, leadership and responsibilities, assurance practices, client relationships, client engagements, human resources, consultation, differences of opinion, engagement quality control review, all of these aspects which are related to audit. So the format has been specified wherein all of these aspects are required to be properly analyzed and properly covered by the reviewers whenever they are submitting their reports. Yeah. Actions that may be recommended by the quality review board. Now, eventually, as we all understand, that it's all about recommendations, because only with the recommendations and the suggestions improvements can happen. So they include, what do they include? So all of these actions which may be recommended. Referring the case to the director discipline of the institute for necessary action. So this can be one of the recommendation. All right. Informing the details of non-compliance to the regulatory body, which may be relevant to the enterprise. For example, it could be IRDA, it could be RBI. Yeah. So though there are some of the regulatory bodies who have been monitoring, who have been regulating the particular enterprise in terms of the sector which the enterprise may be involved in. So that's why all of these information of the details of non-compliance may also be shared with those bodies. Intimating the concerned auditor as to the findings of the report as well as action initiated under A or B. What is A? This is A. This is B. This intimation is sent to the auditor. And who is the auditor? This is the auditor. Consider the matter complete and inform the audit firm or the auditor accordingly. And then, of course, it's all about wrapping up the things the way those are required to be done. We can now quickly look at this quality review checklist. In addition to compliance with statutory provisions and technical standards, following checklist should be used for quality review. So let's quickly go through some of these points which are required to be considered in a quality review. Whether the company has presented financial statements in the required format. What format is that? Schedule 3 now. And depending on the gap which is applicable. It can be division 1, division 2, division 3, or some other changes which may be required, let's say for banking companies, for insurance companies, or for any other companies which are regulated by specific regulator. Are all the accounting policies in accordance with the requirements of applicable accounting standards and guidance notes issued by the ICI? Now, in relation to the accounting standards, we should not consider that to be issued by ICI except in case of non-corporates. Whether all significant accounting policies that should have been disclosed are disclosed. Means again, if you look at all of these points, what will they cover? They will cover preparation of the financial statements in accordance with accounting standards, the regulatory requirements, and after that it's audited by the auditors in accordance with the auditing standards. Whether the disclosures required by the law or regulations, requirements prescribed by the regulations, and those required by the accounting standards have been made. Means ensuring that all the disclosures which are required are included in the financial statement. So it's all about completeness of the disclosures in the financial statements. Next, whether the audit report is qualified, where the audit report is qualified, whether the qualifications have been made in clear and unambiguous language, whether the qualifications have been quantified, if not, whether adequate justification is provided, whether the auditor has considered overall effect of qualification. So it's all about giving the proper disclosure or giving the proper report by the auditor as per the requirements of auditing standard. Now we are talking about all the things which are related to the auditing standards. Whether the auditor has complied with the requirements of auditing standard, and I am not limited to SA 700, it's all about covering various aspects. Auditor's report on financial statements, statement on qualifications in auditor's report, preparation of audit report. Examine the financial statements with a view to ascertain whether there is any unusual accounting treatment, accounting entry. If yes, comment on how it's been dealt with in the financial statements. Does the auditor or the audit firm has a policy to ensure independence, objectivity, integrity in respect of all of its team members? And who is responsible for this policy? Does the auditor monitor compliance with policies and procedures relating to independence? Does the auditor or the audit firm has established procedures for record retention, including the security aspects? Does the auditor or the audit firm evaluate the accounting and the internal control systems, which is again the basic requirements of the audit? Whether the procedures followed ensure that the audit report is in accordance with relevant authoritative requirements? Does it cover all the aspects related to technical standards, including the accounting standards? Does the auditor monitor compliance with policies and procedures relating to independence? And as I have told you, this process of independence is considered to be extremely important in relation to any of the activities related to audit or to attestation or to assurance. Okay, yeah. So I think with this, we are done with our discussion in relation to quality review. So we are done with respect to our discussion on this peer review as well as quality review. Let me just quickly summarize this entire discussion, this entire process. In both the reviews, we can see there's a body which has been mandating this review, and there's a firm which becomes subject to review. What is the objective? Objective is to ensure that the firm is ensuring quality standards in respect of various engagements they have been carrying out, but each and every engagement cannot really be tested. Similar to what auditor does, he cannot test each and everything. So that's why some of the engagements are selected and those are checked whether the firm has been doing the right job or not. And for this, board will have a panel of the reviewers who will then be involved in this process. Yeah. And after that, what will happen? The reviewer will involve with the audit firm or the practice unit, whatever we call it, on the basis of which reports will first of all be discussed with the audit firm or the practice unit, and then those will be finally submitted to the board, on the basis of which board will take next course of action, and board will also come up with all of these suggestions and recommendations to ensure that all of these deficiencies which have been observed in the past in respect of various audit engagements carried out by various audit firms can start going down. All right. Yeah. So with this, we can conclude our discussion in relation to this chapter. We can now, we will meet tomorrow, and tomorrow we'll start with a new topic that is about fiscal law. So we have our session in the morning. So good night to all of you, and thanks to all of you for your time. Thanks so much.